You hear the name Watergate when you immediately think political scandal, right? It has become the blueprint for every scandal that's followed. It's a story that started with what seemed like a clumsy little break-in and somehow ended with the only presidential resignation in American history. This wasn't just some political drama, it was a genuine constitutional crisis that completely changed how Americans see their government, and it all kicked off with one simple question.
So how in the world does that happen? How does a seemingly minor crime dismissed as a third-rate burglary unravel an entire administration and lead directly to the Oval Office? Well, that's the mystery we're going to unpack. And the answer is a wild story of paranoia, some incredibly fearless journalism, and a cover-up that ended up being way, way worse than the original crime. Okay, to really get this, we've got to go back to the early 1970s. President Richard Nixon was cruising towards a huge re-election victory. I mean, things were looking great for him. But inside the White House, there was this deep-seated paranoia, this obsession with political enemies, and especially with information leaks.
So to fight back against this threat they thought was everywhere, they created a secret intelligence unit. Inside the White House, they were known as the plumbers. And their job? Ostensibly, it was to plug leaks. But their methods went way beyond that, into some pretty shady stuff. Espionage, dirty tricks, you name it. And it was exactly this mindset that led them right off a cliff.
And on June 17, 1972, that cliff arrived. 5 men who were connected to the plumbers got caught red-handed breaking into the Democratic National Committee headquarters. But the White House played it cool. They successfully passed it off as just a third-rate burglary, something totally disconnected from them. And you know what? It worked. Nixon cruised to a landslide re-election that November, and for a little while it really looked like the whole story was just going to fade away.
But it didn't fade away, and that's all thanks to a handful of people who just refused to let it go. This is where the political scandal really turns into a detective story. You had 2 young reporters at the Washington Post, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, who just kept digging and digging. And they had help from one of the most famous anonymous sources in history, a high-ranking FBI official they gave the code name Deep Throat. He gave them one simple but absolutely devastating piece of advice: follow the money.
And that's exactly what they did. They started digging and discovered that the burglars were being paid hush money from a secret fund, and when they traced that fund, it led them straight to Nixon's own re-election committee, the Committee to Re-elect the President, or CRP, often called CREEP. This was huge. For the very first time, there was a direct financial link between the break-in and the president's campaign. The cover-up was starting to come apart at the seams.
So now, with the press and pretty soon the Senate asking a lot of tough questions, the pressure on the White House was getting intense. The story wasn't just about a burglary anymore, it was about a full-blown conspiracy. And then came the moment, the bombshell, that changed absolutely everything. The revelation, when it came, was a total shock to everyone. During these televised Senate hearings, a White House aide just casually revealed that President Nixon had a secret voice-activated taping system in the Oval Office. He had recorded everything. Suddenly, there was a potential record of the entire conspiracy.
Well, the special prosecutor on the case, Archibald Cox, immediately subpoenaed those tapes. Nixon refused, claiming executive privilege, but Cox wouldn't back down, so Nixon gave a truly stunning order to his attorney general: fire him. Just get rid of him.
But the Attorney General, a guy named Elliot Richardson, flat out refused. He wouldn't carry out an order that he saw as a massive abuse of power. So what did he do? He resigned in protest.
Nixon wasn't done. He then went to the Deputy Attorney General William Ruckels's house and gave him the exact same order. And guess what? He also refused, and he resigned too. This whole chaotic mess became known as the Saturday Night Massacre, and it showed the American public clear as day that the president was absolutely desperate to hide whatever was on those tapes.
The battle over the tapes had now gone nuclear. It wasn't just a political fight anymore. This was a full-on constitutional crisis, pitting the President of the United States directly against the rule of law and the Supreme Court itself.
The case, as you can imagine, went all the way to the Supreme Court. And in the landmark decision, U.S. versus Nixon, the court ruled unanimously, 8-0, no ambiguity. The decision: the president is not above the law. Nixon had to turn over the tapes. He had absolutely nowhere left to hide. And on one of those tapes, they found it, the smoking gun. A recording from just 6 days after the break-in, where you can hear Nixon himself personally ordering his staff to use the CIA to stop the FBI's investigation. A clear, undeniable act of obstruction of justice.
This was it. This was the proof they needed.
Well, after that, it was over. His support in Congress just evaporated overnight. Impeachment and conviction were now a certainty. So Richard Nixon did the unthinkable. On August 9, 1974, he became the first and still the only president in U.S. history to resign from office.
But the story doesn't really end with Nixon's helicopter lifting off the White House lawn. Not at all. The scandal cast this incredibly long shadow over American politics and culture, a shadow that, you could argue, we are all still living under today.
Think about it like this. Before Watergate, public trust in the federal government was actually pretty high. Afterwards, that trust was shattered. The scandal basically created this new baseline of cynicism and skepticism towards our leaders, towards our institutions, that has, in a lot of ways, just become the new normal.
It even changed the way we talk. I mean, Watergate was so massive culturally that it literally birthed the gate suffix. Ever since then, just tacking gate onto a word has become this universal shorthand for a political scandal. It's like a constant linguistic reminder of that original sin.
The fallout was just immense. President Ford pardoned Nixon, which was hugely controversial. Congress passed new ethics laws to try to prevent this from happening again. The whole playbook of attacking the press as the enemy became a staple of politics. And, Nixon's secret tapes, they almost seem quaint now in our modern world of constant digital surveillance, where a digital footprint follows every single one of us.
So all this leaves us with a pretty big final question. On one hand, you could say the system of checks and balances actually worked. A president was held accountable. But on the other hand, the scandal fundamentally damaged our faith in that very system. So was this the system's finest hour, proving that no one is above the law? Or was it the moment the country's trust was broken for good? That's the debate that Watergate left us with, and it's one we're definitely still having today.